Hi, this is Nancy with On Points Tutorials, Tips, and Tours. We are continuing our series of lessons on the Lemoine Star quilt. So up till now, we have our diamonds made, and it's time to put the quilt together using set-in seams. People also will call it a Y seam. Before I actually take you through the steps on how to construct these seams, I want to show you some different quilts. These are all quilts that I've made over time, and they've got some different examples of Y seams, so that when later on down the road you're wanting to make a tumbling block or a Lemoine Star, you'll know that it really is the same exact process that you used for making the Lemoine Star quilt. So this is a tumbling block quilt. The tumbling block itself is this hexagon. In this particular layout, I used the neutral colored black triangles to offset it and have it stand out a little bit. It also makes the process easier if you've ever done a tumbling block quilt. This is the Y seam on the tumbling block. The block itself consists of 3 different diamonds. Here's another one that I've been working on for a long time. This is one of my many UFO quilts, and this is one of the blocks from it. This is a really good example of a tumbling block. Usually it's got a dark, medium, and light, and this seam is the Y seam. So let's go to another one. This also is a tumbling block quilt, but it's got a couple of other blocks in the mix also. So starting with over here, this is the tumbling block quilt. I think you can see that. It's got the dark, medium, and light. And if we move over just a little bit, you can see a 6-point star. It's actually made in the same way as a tumbling block, but this is created with 6 diamonds going around. When this quilt was in the process, I got these hexagons done, and I didn't want to use that simpler method of putting the triangles in the corners. Instead, I set all of these together, which is just a whole nother series of more set-in seams. So I used the set-in seam to make the block, then I used the set-in seam to construct the rows, and you can see how it would just continue down. Made the quilt really fabulous. I love, love, love this quilt, but that process of setting a zigzag row, if you will, is not the easiest thing you will ever do, but it's worth a try. This one, let's bring it back here. This again is a whole series of those 6-point stars. So this 6-point star is actually constructed from a tumbling block. So can you see the tumbling block here? 2 diamonds and a background fabric. Here is your Y seam. And on this quilt, the background fabric, this really cool kind of polka dot fabric, is the background for all of the stars. And again, this was one of those quilts that I had to do a whole lot of zigzag stitching to get these rows together. This was really fun to do. I love those kind of quilts that require that extra bit of precision piecing. Continuing down, I did not make this quilt. This is a treasure. I found this quilt. I was at an auction in my hometown of Stockbridge, Michigan, and they were having a live auction, and everybody was bidding crazy, and they showed a couple of quilts that were in a really bad state of repair, and the people that were interested in quilts bid really high on those, thinking they were the only ones they were going to get, and then late in the auction, they pulled this one out, and I got this for $70, which in antique quilt world is phenomenal. It's hand-pieced, it's hand-quilted. I love this quilt. And someday I'm going to redo this quilt in modern fabrics. But here you can see the set-in seams. This is an 8-point star, like the traditional Lemoine Star. With the 8-point star, it then has squares going all the way around it that are then brought back into more diamond points with setting triangles on these corners. This quilt has so much going on to it. And someday I am going to reconstruct it and make this into a quilt. But this was done with set-in seams. This 8-point star is a version of a Lemoine Star. So this is a traditional Lemoine Star with the diamonds. And traditionally in Lemoine Stars, they'll have 2 colors, one dark, one a little bit lighter, that gives it 3-dimensional. These are the setting squares and triangles. So when I'm taking you through the process of making the quilt with the setting squares and triangles, we're going to first make a Lemoine Star because it's easier to do set-in seams on a Lemoine Star because it's smaller than it is on your larger Lone Stars. Now we're getting to Lone Stars. All right. This is a Lone Star from Jan Krentz's book, Lone Stars and Beyond. Book is maybe published in maybe 2010, something around there. Really fabulous book. She has such exceptional instructions. And in her book, what I really loved about it is the ideas that she gave you for for the triangles and the squares on the quilt. So here is our Lemoine Star. I'm sorry, our Lone Star. So just like we made last time. And instead of just a solid piece of fabric on the square, it was paper pieced. So each one of these was a paper pieced square that fit in to that setting square section. And on the outside corner, you can see that this is a mariner's compass, or half of a mariner's compass, that fills this entire outside triangle. Really, really fun. Again, this was a Jan Krentz book, and great Jan Krentz design in the book Lone Stars and Beyond. This is also from Jan Krentz. This was a class I took with her, and so this is just a quarter of it. But you can see the Lone Star, the big diamonds, and this is the setting square. This time, the setting square was paper pieced, and kind of a random paper piece. What I mean by that is the square itself. I knew that the square had to be however big it needed to be. I'm going to guess here, I'm going to say 10 inches. It was a piece of freezer paper. I drew lines on the freezer paper and then just pieced the fabrics on those lines. So I created my own setting squares and triangles. Now this is one that should look familiar if you've been watching the show so far. This is the colorway that I've been working with so far. So this is the 4x4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, I repeated the colors. So I started with green, yellow, print, red, print, yellow, green. So those are the diamonds I made. And while I wasn't making those diamonds, I also told you about lining your diamonds up by the fat side of the triangle. So I call this the fat side of the triangle as opposed to the skinny point of the triangle. And that is your traditional Lone Star. But I, on purpose, talked to you about lining them up on purpose. And I'm going to move the quilt real quick here. Sometimes you line the points up by the skinny part. So here, it's lined up on the skinny end. And do you see the difference? Do you see how the stars on the inside actually go around the fat part of the diamond? But the diamonds on the outside of the star, they actually are, it's different. When you look at it, the diamonds on the inside, the diamonds on the outside, and you can see that red center flows differently. This is just another way to set a Lone Star. And you can see also that it's a large hexagon that I finished with large triangles on the outside to make it a square quilt. I didn't know that I ever wanted to sleep under a hexagon-shaped quilt. Wasn't really sure how that would work, so I made it into a large square. This is another one that I showed you a little bit of early on. And oh my goodness, quilters come with strings attached. Okay, let's get those out of there. So this one is the one I've been working on for a while. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 6. I changed my colors, started with the purple on the inside, came all the way on out to the red. So because I had the purple on the inside of that star, I chose a purple for the setting squares and triangles. Now, something I want you to keep in mind is that is a very plain fabric. Just that purple fabric, for me, will not be enough. When it comes time for me to finish this quilt, because I still got to do borders and decide what I'm going to design on there, I need to either put some applique in this, or I need to do some fabulous quilting. For me, a solid piece of fabric for the setting squares and triangles is just not enough. It just kind of is boring. So I'm going to have to think of something to put in those setting squares and triangles when it comes time. Same thing with this, but this is a Lone Star that is done in a pineapple. So this is a pineapple block turned into a Lone Star. This entire diamond was paper pieced, the entire thing. Really, really fun to do. So the same diamonds that we have in a Lone Star, and again, a very solid fabric in my setting squares and triangles, which I love the look of this, but I gotta quilt something fabulous in here, otherwise it'll just be kind of boring to me. And I made this really teeny tiny pineapple one too. Stuff. This one won't be so hard to finish, I just need to get around to it. But here, the same idea as that big one. These are tiny pineapples done in a diamond shape, which gives you that pineapple Lone Star. This is all paper pieced also. And finally is the big one. This was a design, this was a kit from RJR Fabrics, I don't know, close to 100 years ago. It seems like I made it about that long ago. And this was not the easiest one I ever made by any means. And what I mean by that is all of these diamonds. So this large diamond, and this is a large quilt. This is like king size quilt. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 by 10. Lot of fabrics, solid floral, solid floral, solid floral, solid floral. I love that design aesthetic they did there. And then for the setting squares and triangles, let me scooch this up, you can see that it's another star. So there's a whole nother star in each one of the setting squares and triangles. So now you've seen a whole lot of the quilts that I've made. I've made quite a few of them. I enjoy the Lone Star like I told you last time. Next time we get together, I am going to show you how to measure and design and sew in your setting seams.